Good morning, Professor Kenny.
Hey, there's an iPad 147. I don't want to let them in, so we're not gonna. Let me let everybody in individually.
Who is it? iPad 147. I'll
Yeah,
help with bringing people in.
yeah. You work from the bottom. I'll work from the top.
Okay, no worries.
And then there's another. There's a couple that we don't. I can't identify, so I'm not letting them in.
Okay.
That USJV. I don't know who that is. So.
Okay. I'll try typing to them in the waiting room and see if they respond.
Yep.
I'll type, please put your full
Yeah, you have
name.
to identify yourself.
Yeah.
Luke takes forever to join. Okay, folks, we're gonna get started momentarily. Yeah, Luke's trying a different way to join now. Okay. All right, folks. Good morning. It is Thursday, January 8th, 2026. This is the post morning meeting show, post DC Huddle show. I am your host, Professor Kenny, joined by my co host, Alan Triniski. Alan hosts the evening show at night after Mark's 2A tonight, 7 p.m. He'll put the link in the chat if you haven't already joined that show. So of course, the shooting in Minneapolis is going to take a bunch of our time here. So I'll just comment on what I think about it, and then I'll start pinning people. I'll ask Alan what he thinks, and then we'll start pinning people in and let you have your go at it. And some of you were on Alan's show last night. I popped in and I basically voiced this opinion. Um, First of all, when you see a video, somebody's using a cell phone and then they upload it onto YouTube or the legacy media gets it and posts it. Um, it only tells a part of the story. It doesn't tell the whole story. Unless and even if you're there in person, that only tells part of it. So, they say the worst, the worst witness is an eyewitness because if you don't get to them right away, they make start changing their mind about things. So um, it was funny in the chat today on Mark's show. I saw the guy Lenny going off on how, and Mark showed the videos of the car hitting the cop, and Lenny's like, I don't see the car hitting the cop. So that's why I mean, these videos only tell a part of the story. Um, the first video I ever saw of the whole thing was the woman's car blocking the traffic. So that's where, but was she blocking the traffic? And that's what I'm saying about videos not being reliable. So it's an unfortunate thing. Um, if this woman took it upon herself to make a decision to interfere with law enforcement, um, then she was breaking the law and she put herself in danger and put other people in danger. Okay, never mind the cop. Okay, so, or the ICE agent. So that's unfortunate. As Americans, I agree with what Larry O'Connor said. If you don't like what's going on, then you vote it out, or you can protest peacefully off to the side. But when you place yourself in between law enforcement and what their duty is, you're creating a situation that can only go bad. So, on the other side of this, and people say, oh, we can say, oh, why didn't he shoot her in the knee and all of this bullshit? That's not how it works in a 1 second kind of situation. I would like to think, me personally, if I was a law enforcement officer, if I was that guy who shot her, that I wouldn't have shot her, that I would have just let her go because, you know, I don't, from from afar, this looks like something that could have happened, that you could have just let her go. But I don't know. What if she had a gun in the car? I don't know what's going on. So that's the thing. You can't, it's hard to make these judgments. Okay. So this will just play itself out. It's easy to have opinions. Oh, the steering wheel was turned. I saw that argument in the chat. The steering wheel was turned to the right. What the fuck does that mean? How stupid is that? You know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything. You know, the law enforcement officer tried to get her to get out of the car, and she refused, and she drove away. So that's what I could tell. So I don't know. This is very hard stuff. But the bottom line is, you don't interfere with law enforcement. Simple as that. It's not your right to interfere with law enforcement. That's a crime. Once you do that, you change the whole ball game, and then situations like this happen, and that's what people have to realize. Okay, so it's a
Yeah.
very unfortunate thing, and of course we got people on the left calling the guy a murderer, and people on the right saying he did his job. So once again, we're on other side, opposite sides of the fence. We're never going to get to the middle on this kind of stuff, and it's unfortunate. So,
Uh, can I just say
yep.
something real quick? The language that people are using to describe her, they're calling her a victim. They're saying, "Oh, the victim tried to flee the scene." Well, first off, she's not a victim because she was a victim of her actions, but she wasn't a victim. She was at that point a criminal who disobeyed an order from a lawful from a federal agent, right? So they're framing her as a victim. They're framing this word flee. I'm seeing it everywhere on X. She's fleeing. She's fleeing. In what world are you able to flee from a police officer? What world are we living in? We live in and I'm going to take words from Wesley because I love when he says this. We live in a civil society. A civil Western society where we have trust. When a police officer asks us to do something, we do it. We don't disobey. She wasn't fleeing. The second she disobeyed the order, put her car in reverse, tried to run away, whether she was aiming at the officer or not, she was now she was now she was now a threat to the officer, and he didn't know what she was going to do. And I don't justify that she deserved to die. She didn't deserve to die, but we need to stop labeling this woman as a victim. We need to stop saying the word flee because you can't flee from cops. If I get pissed off or I think I'm in danger, am I allowed to run from the cops? No. It's just absurd to me. And they're trying to use these words like victim and flee and whatever. She was obstructing justice. She was resisting arrest. She was interfering in investigation. At that point, she became a suspect in those crimes until it's proven in court. So I'm just over people trying to reword and rephrase criminality in this country. We're watering it down to the point we're going to be in a lawless third world society. So
Yeah.
That's it. There's my rant. I'm
Yep.
done
Okay.
talking.
No, it's fair. I saw Lily put in the chat. She's not a criminal, Alan. She was a criminal, Lily. Once she made those actions, she became a criminal. Does she deserve to be shot and killed? That's a different debate. But once you go obstruct law enforcement, you're a criminal. Okay. So that's unfortunate though. All right, let's start bringing people in. I'm gonna unmute Dean from Ohio. Dean, come on in.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good
Tough
morning.
times right now, and I I'll start with some positives. First off, it was so good to see so many of this community here. I'm seeing their faces here on last night, on this morning, sharing in and using two-way as it was intended to be, and I'm hoping that that can continue. I'm Here's the backdrop. Here is the backdrop that I am observing this through right now. We live in a world where we can't even tell, who is a man and who is a woman. Okay, some basic fundamental facts. That's number one. Number two, the America that I grew up in is we don't have a shared sense in the 250th year coming up on it. We don't have a shared sense of what that means. We're all Americans, but that shared common sense of where we're going and who we are as a people is very divisive right now. It's black, very polar, I guess would be the right way to put it. So that said, I'm most concerned with, I want to make sure with for this community especially, that we're careful with the absolutes that we use. Is she a criminal? Is she not a criminal? I've got an opinion on that. I, gosh, anyone that said anyone, I was right there with Professor Kenny when somebody mentioned about wounding. This is a my father-in-law is a former police officer. And it's always a funny conversation to bring up. No one in law enforcement draws a weapon to wound. It's just not a part. And this goes to what I think Haley was, and what I thought at one point. Well, is it a training issue then? Is it look, if that training kicked in, which I believe happened with that law enforcement officer, that ICE agent, if it was training kicked in, does training need to be different? That's a valid question. That's a valid question to have. My bigger concern for this community is that the questions can be asked. Let me start from this. I love Mark's show for this reason. He posits that he has not found anyone who is on the right side of the aisle that doesn't see that as proper law enforcement, and the left side of the aisle that doesn't see it that it was some aggravated assault murder by the ICE agent. That intrigues me because my first thought is always to go back. Well, I wonder how the community is going to respond. Are we going to be able to navigate through this? Um, so I I come before you to hope that A, you feel very comfortable telling it how you feel. You've seen it. And B, you stay and you interact and you feel comfortable listening to other points of view on a matter that is very polarizing. So hopefully we can all stay together and get through this on the way to our 250th year on this in this country. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that, Dean. Let's get Bob in. What's going on, Bob?
Good morning. I mean, it's not a good morning, but I hope to the extent everyone's capable of having a good morning, they are. Um, actually almost for the first time tried to get on last night in the evening. It just usually doesn't fit with my schedule, but I had a feeling a lot of uh, a lot of us would have been there, and I would have liked to have been there, but it just wasn't going to work out. Um, Also, I see something yesterday, Jimmy, that you did indeed have a morning meeting after show yesterday after all?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, well I missed
Yeah,
that
I
one too,
sent the
Judge.
email, and what happened was I didn't win the lottery, so I didn't have to go to Gainesville to collect my money. So that's why I had canceled the show.
Bummer.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, anyway, just a couple of observations. And what I was hearing last night, including on Mark's evening show and things like that, is, I mean, first of all, and it crossed my mind, and I think Larry used the term uh, this morning. That when I started watching the video, and okay, we're going to go into granular detail. Here's this view, here's that view. And at the bottom line, though, just by judging from the comments that were coming in, all it ends up being is, to a large extent, maybe not for everybody, but to a large extent, it just becomes a Rorschach test on how you feel about Trump. That's my opinion. If you hate Trump and you think ICE is the devil because that's what you've been told, then you're going to see a guy that's murdering somebody that didn't have to do that. If you're somebody that says, look, Trump was elected to do this. ICE has a mission that's legal, and this is a term I want to get back to. And you're not allowed to interfere with that. And then when panic or whatever happened to that lady happens, and the car starts moving, a law enforcement guy does what he's, I assume, trained to do. Um, it just seems like it's a Rorschach test. You see what you want to see, regardless of what's actually there. You might know, I'm sure you know this movie. I always come back to movies, Jimmy, but Blow Up, Antonioni's Blow Up, right? Which then was kind of done in a different vein by a movie called Blow Out in the early 80s with John Travolta, which
Yep.
both of them excellent things, but it gets to the, I'm not interested personally in identify, watching these videos 50 times for the granular detail. I think you can see enough from a couple of points of view. And then the rest of it is, I guess what a person thinks. But so often what I hear people express is what they think that doesn't tie back to the law. I mean, the only questions that I have about this thing are, was ICE involved in a lawful law enforcement operation? Right? If they were, and she was obstructing it, if she was obstructing it. Now I say if because maybe she drove down the street and found herself in that situation by accident. I don't know all the facts. But if she's obstructing it, then okay, that's obstruction of justice. If she starts to flee when she's ordered to get out of the car, that's resisting arrest. She's definitely endangering an officer's life. I saw Chris on the chat with the morning meeting saying, well, the cop walked away, with a normal gait, so he wasn't that injured. As if that's the measure.
expert.
I hit him up on that a couple times just trying to get a response. So I'm like, well, if she'd run over his foot and it was broken, then that would have justified the shooting, because you can't really have that standard, right? In police training anyway. It's a split-second decision. And also to these people that say, well, they could have let her go. I think it's one of these damned if you do, damned if you don't situations, because if you let her go and then she goes down, runs down ICE agents or people, regular, bystanders, then what? Then, they get blamed for that. Well, why didn't they stop her when they had the chance? I mean, I just think that it's not for me to determine, but if these guys followed their training, which I have mostly, I don't have any reason based on what I've heard to think that they violated in some fashion, then, this woman put herself in this situation. And that gets to my bigger point is I've been banging the gong on this since last summer at the bare minimum, that I feel like there's been a shift in polling especially on the left, about when, violence is justified, when interfering with the law is justified, and it's shifted dramatically. And as soon as I started seeing people like Newsom describe ICE as people that just snatch people off the street in mass as if they're kidnappers, like they're not obeying the law. And again, I listened to the mayor. I don't remember his name. The mayor of Minneapolis, I thought last night was a disgrace. I thought Walls was a disgrace. And I hear these guys using all this loaded language, but nobody's demonstrated to me that ICE is not operating. They are a federal law enforcement agency. Nobody has demonstrated to me that they are operating unlawfully. They're doing basically what they're ordered to do. And again, it gets back to who's in charge now. and that was decided by an election. If to me, a tragedy. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but maybe you could Google it. The cop that shot a lady, he was inside this lady's apartment, and he shot her
Yes.
in her kitchen.
Yes.
And it appeared to me like that was a huge tragedy.
Yep.
Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that
He was
that this.
convicted, the cop,
Yes,
too.
yes, and he probably should have been based on what I saw. But I'm not trying to say that this woman deserved it or anything like that. What I am saying is that she put herself in a situation that was completely avoidable. And I don't know if anybody here's ever had a gun pulled on them by a law enforcement officer, but I have. And looking back on it, I won't even get into the details. It was a long, long time ago. But the bottom line is I had something to do with that too. And had I acted differently than I acted, I very easily could have been shot and killed. But I would argue in retrospect that had I been, it would have been my fault for putting myself in that situation to begin with. And that's not a political statement. That's just to me, a reality statement.
Yeah.
And then lastly, and I've tried to gift myself a link to this so I can post it in the chat, which I thought was a fairly persuasive case written by Andrew McCarthy in yesterday's National Review about more or less how these sorts of things regarding the lawful use of force, in this case, lethal force, was basically settled law, and it went back to a case from 1985, and there, in his opinion, there was no way to argue basically that this cop, was a murderer or violated the law in some fashion. I'm not going to try to play lawyer on here, but it sure made a lot of sense to me. Josh had said something in response to me in the chat earlier. Maybe he can speak to it a little more eloquently than I can. But anyway, those were some of my thoughts this morning. But and I just want to end on this. If you're going to continue to get responses out of people like the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota and things that Governor Newsom has said, and by the way, there's a trend here because they're all leftist Democrats. If they're going to keep proselytizing on this and making ICE the devil and preaching resistance, there's going to be more blood on the streets. And that's, I pray that these people would say, listen, don't get involved with this. Don't interfere with law enforcement. Don't go out and protest on the streets last night. They could have said, stay home. I know at some point you want to protest or speak your mind on this, but tonight's not the night to do it. Any of that stuff would have been responsible, and I heard none of it. So I'll just end with that.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing about our politics is because they make it politics. They make, law enforcement, if it doesn't abide by their way, then, in terms of a political sense, then of course it's, they're the devil, the Gestapo, the whole 9 yards. It's just ridiculous what's going on. I brought this up last night on Alan Shall bring it up here. I did a quick Google last night. Approximately, we've deported 600,000 people in the last year, and 1.9 million have self-deported. Okay? Out of all of that processing that goes on, 32 people have died in the process. Heart attacks, whatever, going through the process. 32 out of, 2.5 million people. Okay, so I just want people to think about that when the legacy media is playing this 24/7 about one woman who, you know, uh, whether she did or not obstruct justice and was a victim, and got herself killed. We need to get more information. But 32 people have died out of 2.5 million. I think that's a pretty good record if you're processing people that don't belong here and you're getting them out of the country. So I just wanted to bring that up. I'm going to bring Wally in.
Thank you, for Professor Kenny. Good morning, everyone. I probably like everyone here. I've got tons of thoughts on all facets of this thing in Minneapolis. And I agree with you, Professor Kenny. You've said it many times. We need to wait and see all the facts that come out. We can all form an opinion based on the videos we saw, but we just don't have all the information. From my own personal perspective and my personal experience in law enforcement, that the shoot appeared to be good to me, but it's still way too preliminary to make a final decision. And there'll be a very thorough investigation with them digging up all the interviewing everyone, and they're going to hopefully get to the bottom of it and get a good clarification. Unfortunately, oftentimes what I've seen in the past is, uh, you know, during the hysteria that follows for the week or two after a controversial shooting like this, you know, we can sit around and discuss all this without knowing all the facts, and then oftentimes later, maybe a month later or 2 months later, all the facts, some of the important facts do come out, but it never gets publicized or put in the news, and so oftentimes most people never really find out, what the outcome was. But hopefully we will hear. But last night, Professor Kenny, you made a comment. I don't know if you're still here. Um, I had wanted to ask you a follow-up question on, and that was you talked about this incident up there in Minneapolis. You thought maybe your general feeling was you thought this might kind of not gain a lot of legs, might kind of peter out a little bit. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, I was thinking the opposite. So I'm just kind of curious what maybe your perspective is or why you feel that.
I feel this won't gain a lot of legs, and I might say something controversial here, but because the woman who was killed is a white woman, and
Okay.
I don't think it'll gain as much legs as it would be if it was a Latino woman with three kids in the car, or an African American woman with a child in the car or whatever. And being that it happened in Minnesota, I think also loses its steam based on what's going on in Minnesota. I'm just looking at this politically. I'm not looking at this
Okay.
in a personal way. You know what I'm saying? If I analyze it politically, will this have a lot of steam? I don't think so. I think this thing will die out. Plus, we got so many other things going on in the world with Venezuela and Iran and stuff like that. So I think this thing will just die out. That's my opinion.
Okay. That last part you mentioned about all the other things going on in the world, I guess I hadn't necessarily consider that, but I think that's a great point. My thought was if this does gain legs and does maybe could become a tipping point, it might be because of there's so much this the issue of immigration is not going to go away. The issue of ICE going into communities and arresting people isn't going to go away, and it seems to be building more. More. There's more pressure boiling up on it, and I'm wondering if this is going to be that tipping point where one, it's happening up in Minnesota where there just seems to be all kinds of issues going on right now. It's just what a disaster up there on many levels. But the feds aren't going to stop this, and it seems as if the left is doubling down on their stance on anti-ICE, and there's such a division. I'm wondering if this can be a tipping point, and it all just comes to head there. And anyway, that was kind of my thought.
Yeah. Listen, Trump is emboldened right now. I mean, he's been emboldened
Sure.
from day one, but like with what he's doing, there's no backing down from this administration is not backing down from anything. And you saw like if you get the vice president coming out hard against whoever that lawyer was that Mark talked about on the two-way, they're not going to back down 1 inch, and that's why I think this thing will lose its steam. Plus nobody
What'll
watches
be
the legacy media anyway, so
That's true. What'll be interesting is if the Keith Ellison, state attorney general, or the local prosecutor somehow decide, to make a political statement, they're going to try and prosecute the officer again, rushing to judgment on whether what the final outcome of his determination on the shooting, if it was appropriate or not. But let's just suppose, they decide they're going to prosecute this officer up there. Well, it's not like they're prosecuting one of their local police officers like they did Derek Chauvin. I think that was there, right? Um, they'd be trying to prosecute a federal law enforcement officer and I just don't wonder what the Trump administration, if they would really get their back up against the wall on that, how they would come out swinging.
they're
So I
not
could
going to
see
let
this maybe be,
yeah, the feds aren't going to let this guy get prosecuted by Minnesota. It's not going to happen.
I
But
certainly would hope not. So
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Jack, how are you?
Doing well, Jimmy. Thanks for calling on me. Uh, I'd like to presage my comments by mentioning I don't support all of the president's deportation efforts. I'd rather he had a bit softer touch, focusing more on the violent criminals than on the maids and some of the people that do some of these shitty jobs, particularly here in South Texas. Having said that, though, I have nothing but contempt for these mayors and governors that sit there and stand by and stoke fires against federal officials doing their jobs. And there's no the fact there was no police presence here holding these protesters at bay. I think is appalling. And that happens in more places than Minneapolis. Uh, and of course, another thing is this over-the-top rhetoric. To me, I'm no lawyer, but it seems to me murder has some degree of intent and advanced thought before you start throwing that kind of verbiage around. It just gets ridiculous, and I support anybody that says I think this woman was no victim. Everything I see here is she was just refusing to obey valid police orders, and she paid the price because when a policeman has split seconds to make a decision, the fact that you can then take cell phone footage that only shows part of the story and play it in slow motion is just intentionally deceptive.
Yeah.
Off my soapbox.
Yeah. Listen, this is we've been beating our heads against the wall about this stuff. It's the left versus the right, and we can't come to the middle on this. We can't, like I said in the chat, that guy Lenny Glynn, the Mark shows the video of the van hitting the cop, and Lenny says, "I don't see that." Okay, maybe he doesn't see that. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's why I say these videos are so. When these mayors like that look at the George Floyd situation and what happened in Minnesota and go on, and you still got the same mayor in charge there, still have the same governor who's now, thank God, is not going to run again for those people. But it's the rhetoric is just going to fly high because whatever Trump does, the left hates, and whatever the left wants, Trump and the right hates. And we're nowhere near on being agreeable on anything. And incidents like this make it worse because these are supercharged incidents. People losing their lives and stuff like that. So it's very emotional and very hard. Like you could just see how the chat was all fired up today on Mark's show, but it was partisan. It was our friends on the left saying what they had to say, our friends on the right saying what they had to say. So I don't, I think with this one, we really should, though, take a little step back and let all the facts come out. And, because we can all make judgments about uh, what she was doing, what she wasn't doing. Why was the ICE agent trying to pull her out of the car if she wasn't doing anything? That kind of stuff. We need to get to the bottom of it. But unfortunately, Jack, that the way this is going to play out until, like I said, I think this will peter out pretty quickly, to be honest with you.
Well, you
Because people are
mentioned
tired.
George Floyd.
Yeah, people are tired of this shit, and we become anesthetized to this stuff. You know what I mean? So, oh yeah, no, somebody got shot. Oh, okay, well, what happened? It's unfortunate. Move on. That's how we get because we're just tired of this stuff.
Well, you
And
mentioned George Floyd, and if you
mhm.
recall, in the wake of that situation, just a couple weeks later, there was some rural female cop that shot a guy in a very similar situation. She stopped him, thought she was going for her taser, and pulled a gun. And
Yeah, I remember
I'm
that.
not sure if he was killed or just shot, but uh, they went after her. But once again, that was in that high emotion era, weeks after the George Floyd incident. I think they quietly commuted her sentence, but certainly her professional life was destroyed.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's a different debate, grabbing your taser and thinking it's a gun. I don't know about that, but I don't want to go there. But I understand what you're saying, Jack. Let's bring in Nicole. Hey, Nicole.
Good morning, everybody. I am really upset over this situation. I cried for a significant portion of the evening last night, really just because I don't think that anybody should have to die. And life is precious, and we should all remember that. I also think that we've gotten to a point in the country where we don't all agree that we need to all follow the law. And we have to, in my opinion, get back to that point where we all agree whether we like the law or not, we must follow it. And if we don't like the law, then we must fight through Congress and legislation to get the law changed. But we don't exist as a society that functions well by not all agreeing on and following the law as it's written. I feel like it's been a long time coming with a lot of the cultural rhetoric around law enforcement, from defund the police and everything else that has kind of led down this road of abandoning our social contract that we all agree that to follow and live in this country together. We have been great for as long as we've been great because of that agreement. We've lived in safe communities because of that agreement. We agree that we're not going to go break the law and damage our neighbor's property, or we agree that we're all going to follow road signs so that we don't crash into each other. And when those things are not followed, there are consequences, and we face the law. And I just think that we can see that clearly in those certain circumstances. And then all of a sudden, we look at these broader topics and we don't anymore. And we play, okay, well, we want the law to apply here when that person is corrupt or that person is doing a bad thing, but we don't want to apply here because this falls in line with our social justice perspective. And it doesn't matter what your opinion is or what your view is when it comes to the moment in which you must obey the law. And again, we can't get anywhere as a society unless we agree on that foundation point. And the problem is like, we don't agree on that foundation point. We have a large swath of our population that thinks that our laws are bad and unjust and don't think that we should have certain ones. And my argument is like, we've gotten to this point because we've had a lot of them. And I just, we have to, the apologetics that has happened in our culture and the whole oppressor versus oppressed perspective is very frustrating to me when it comes to this point, because we have sacrificed so much to get to where we are and to be the America we are. And I really think that we sacrifice to live in a society, we sacrifice to follow these laws in order to uplift everybody and to all agree that we will do this. And I think that has been the loss of that has been one of the major reasons why we've seen a decline in our safety and our society in general. And
Yeah.
I'll stop.
Yeah, no, listen, you mentioned a social contract, right? We have laws, right? We vote elected officials in, right? This is all part of the social contract, right? So we have law enforcement. That's part of the cop pulls you over, you comply. Okay? This idea that, oh, if they, I don't like to comply because they'll shoot me. Like it's all bullshit. It's bullshit. Okay? You follow the instructions of law enforcement. When you make that decision, how many times are you going to say this? I'll debate this with Lily down the road about what the idea of a criminal is. Once you disobey the police and you you break the law, you're a criminal. And this is what happened in this case. I think I need more facts. Okay, I need more facts. But the bottom line is she drove away when they were trying to stop her. Okay, did she deserve to die for that? No, nobody deserves to die. But hey, you do something that is criminal behavior. Okay, you break the law, you interfere, you obstruct, that puts yourself in a bad situation, and something like this can happen. And that's what we have to understand. It's not, well, should he shot her? Should he not shot her? What he should? No, you inserted yourself into a situation you shouldn't have. And this is what the outcome is, whether it's just or not. And that's the problem. Let's bring in Rex.
Morning, Professor Kenny. How you doing today?
I'm good.
So, and Wally can probably speak to this. A lot is going to come out about this action. And one of the things that I think, at least I haven't heard any mention of, or seen anything of, will be the body cams of the officers, the dash cams of the vehicles the officers were in, as to just exactly what this woman had been doing, as they said that she was trolling all day long with these officers. So at the point to where she finally pulled up in front of them and blocked them, she put herself in a in a real hazardous position, and we can see what happened. But I think a lot of this goes back to 2020, during all the riots, the stuff that went down in Seattle, the stuff that went down in Portland, to where people could block off blocks in a city and say, we're not going to obey your laws. And the Democrats, and I put this on the Democrats, they just sat back and let it happen. So many times you saw on the news, well, it was a peaceful protest, and there's fires, and they're turning over cars, and they're lighting dumpsters on fire. And I'm going, that is not a peaceful protest. But the Democrats turned a blind eye to it, and now you have a segment of people who believe we don't have to obey the police. And I don't know exactly how we turn that ship around, but we need to turn the ship around.
What else can we say?
You're
You're 100% right. I mean, listen, this, and I love that, like that whole idea about defund the police. Who's going to protect you? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when you need a cop, you're quick to go, oh, I need the cops. Let's call the cops. But when you don't need the cops, oh, the cops suck. They're no good. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I've been going back to my younger days. I've been pulled over by the police more times than I can count, usually for speeding, speed exhibition, and things like that. And the one thing you don't do that I learned very early is if a policeman pulls you over, you don't get out of your car. They will pull a gun on you, without a doubt. They want you to stay in your car, and they will come up and they will have their conversation with you. And I have found well, not most, all the police officers I've ever had an interaction with being very professional, and I've had face-to-face arguments with police officers, and we've both walked away saying we were both wrong. So it is an interesting world out there, and yeah, George Floyd wouldn't be dead right now if he'd have just gotten the police car and let him take him to wherever the jail or wherever they wanted to take him. He fought back, and unfortunately, it cost him his life.
Well, the resistance of law enforcement creates a problem no matter where we are and no matter who does it. Let's bring in Sharon. There you go. Hey,
Hey.
Sharon.
I just want to say this is tragic. I'm really beside myself that something like this has happened. It was kind of inevitable at some point, but it's tragic all the way around. And I keep going back to a line that Thomas Sowell has said: it costs the politician nothing. You've got politicians on both the left and the right that are ramping up the emotions of their base, their electorate. And these people are out there cosplaying the revolution. You've got right now people combating ICE, but look at the lawmakers last night in Minnesota. That was appalling. But then I also thought about Donald Trump on January 6th. You've got a lot of heated emotions, and Donald Trump gets to go back to the White House with his Secret Service, and you turn a bunch of upset people thinking that they are doing something heroic. And the people that suffer are just your average American, like this poor lady was. She had bought into the rhetoric of the left that she needed to get out there and protect the people of Minnesota. And it's just tragic. It's very tragic.
Yeah, there's no denying this is a tragedy, and uh, uh, listen, it's very difficult because I'm still of that ilk that if it was me, I wouldn't have shot her. But and I'm a hothead, okay? But
I don't think though the problem
if they're
is
gonna
my dad.
follow, if they have some kind of, if they have to follow procedure, and this guy got hit by the car and felt threatened, this is what happens. The problem I have is why are we in this situation to begin with? Why is somebody inserting themselves into a position against law enforcement for this thing to happen? That's my argument.
And that's the problem with the heated rhetoric on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, this is a situation of the lawmakers in Minnesota and other sanctuary states. You can hear it nightly on the news. What they're calling law enforcement officers is appalling. And you hear this even, I don't know, 15 years ago from Maxine Waters. You've got to get out there and get in their face. I mean, they're ginning up. They're not protests where there's just somebody on the sign saying, ICE go home. They're inserting themselves. We've ratcheted up what our First Amendment right is. And there are people on both sides that feel that their First Amendment right is to now become involved, which is not your First Amendment right. But the politicians are fine to let that happen because it costs them nothing. I mean, Jacob Fry saying, get the F out. He went home last night. He has his security. He's fine. And the problem is normal people have to say no to both the left and the right ratcheting up this rhetoric, and we keep going back to the same thing. So my 2 cents.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Kelly.
Hey guys. So I guess not that I don't like hearing everyone's take on it, but I guess I'll come back to something I said yesterday. Like ultimately, in my opinion, the question is like, where do we go from here? What do we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Right? Like there's a lot of energy around it, and I get, I get it, people want to vent and everything. But one of the things I do at work is root cause problem analysis. And I just look at this whole situation and I'm looking, and like if two parties don't agree to what the problem is, it's like nearly impossible to find a solution that works for everyone, right? Because so I just think like, in what I see in this case is, yeah, we do need to analyze and evaluate, this behavior and who was wrong there and everything. But unless we're willing to like dig a little deeper, right? Because I would speculate there are some people that don't think ICE should be doing anything, right? That they should not be removing anyone. And on the other side, I would think there's some crazies out there that think, ICE should be removing everyone that wasn't born in the country or something, on the two extremes. But I just, what I hope is that this opportunity isn't lost to dig a little deeper, right? And get down a step further to hopefully whether we have to change laws or whatnot. So
Yeah. Well, listen, we've never in this country experienced this kind of effort in terms of immigration, right? Like
yeah,
Obama was called the deporter in chief, but not like this, right?
yeah,
So neighborhood to neighborhood, all of that kind of stuff. This is what the right voted for, right?
yeah,
This is, hey, I'm a Republican. This is what the right voted for, all right? They
yeah,
voted for getting all of these people out of here that came in here illegally. And then, of
yeah,
course, the rhetoric was, well, we're going to get the bad hombres first, the bad people first. And then it's like, no, you're not getting the bad people. You're scooping everybody up. So it just
yeah.
becomes an endless non-winnable debate.
And to that extent, I think there should be more transparency out of this administration. I don't see how that hurts, right? Um, but on the flip side, you know, this Trump was elected. This agenda was chosen, like by, more people chose it than didn't.
Right.
So at
And
some
then
point,
and then the
we have
people
to
that are
accept.
really upset about it, if they get enough people, they'll vote him out.
Yeah. So but in the interim, hopefully, like I don't know how we get our higher level politicians, like Walls and Trump should just get on the phone and hash this out a little, right? I know that's maybe crazy of me to expect, but just if they're not going to do it, I guess is it our responsibility as people to 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 do it a little bit. And I think again, we can't just pick off like this is a symptom. This incident is a symptom of a much larger problem, disagreement at a higher level. So, anyways, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. David March, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, yeah. So for me, a lot of this, like, the only reason we're having this conversation really is because it's ICE. If this was an incident that happened between two state troopers doing a, a speeding ticket, we wouldn't be having this conversation. For me, a lot of the immigration stuff could be solved through legislation, and that's unfortunately what's happening here is that we're not solving this through the Congress and the Senate the way it's supposed to be done in the U.S. Like, you want to get rid of all the illegal immigrants? Pass E-Verify and put in fines on employers.
Yeah.
Every one of your illegal immigrants. You got someone here who doesn't have their green papers, you're on the hook for $5,000 a day for every day you employ this guy. And you wouldn't have all the employers would not hire illegals, and all the legals would go home, or most of them would go home. If you're like your nanny there that's doing this stuff, some rich white person probably like this driver, uh, you know, you got yourself an illegal alien working for $5 an hour when you should instead of paying the minimum wage. You're being fined $5,000 a day until you get someone to do this. And it used to be when I was growing up, we didn't have illegal aliens doing all these works. We had this other group of people we called teenagers who would be my babysitter. So for me, a lot of this stuff could be solved, but you're not able to get anything through your Congress and your Senate, blaming this all on Trump. He's just trying to do what he can do with the tools available to him. If the Congress and the Senate would do its freaking job, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. And that's my kind of take on it. So for me, also, I've been paying a lot more attention to Iran. I think Yakov's probably very happy seeing the fact that the Shah is going to be reinstalled pretty soon. And I do have a question for the good Baron. What did you think about Castle Keep? Thanks.
Okay. Haley, you had your hand up and now it's down. You want in?
I'm like debating, but you can get to other people.
Okay.
Get to other people.
But raise your hand when you want something. Okay. Let's get to my good friend Lily who wants to beat me up. What's going on, Lil?
Sorry. I'm kind of not myself today. I had a bad evening last night, so I apologize if I'm a little bit out of sorts, but I wanted to address some issues here. So I feel like a lot has been said about this woman and a lot of pre judgment that we don't have the right to make. There was all of this yesterday. I hadn't heard the story yesterday. I learned it for the first time when I tuned into 2A. And so there was this idea that she had been harassing ICE all day. Uh, that would not have been possible because the shooting happened in the morning. Um, I did some research on this, and it turns out that she had just dropped off her kid. It's quite possible that she wasn't even there to protest it. The people that are talking about her have said that she was not an activist in any way. So we don't even know why she was there. Also, this notion of I take really strong objection to calling her a criminal. We don't know what her intent was. We really just don't know. We don't even have an investigation yet. Certainly, calling her a domestic terrorist is incredibly premature. Um, if you watch the video, there's kind of conflicting commands. One person is saying, get out of the car. Another person's telling her to move the car. So it's quite possible that she was heard the move the car and was responding to that. We really just don't know. To kind of assume the worst of this person and assume the worst of the situation is really unfair. And I also think it's really unfair to assume the worst of the law enforcement officer in this scenario. Because we don't know what his intentions were. We don't know what he was dealing with, how that's why I think the investigation is so important. And I'm really sad to hear people refer to her as a criminal, quite frankly, because I think that's incendiary, quite frankly. So I want to make those points. I want to make another point, if you guys don't mind, and that's I made this point yesterday, and I feel like I got a little bit of ridicule for it, and that's fine. It's fair game. I'm outnumbered here amongst you all, but um, I do blame Trump for this. I do think Trump is a different animal, political animal than our previous presidents. Um, and I do think that he has ratcheted up the rhetoric in a way that previous people and other politicians on both sides of the aisle have not. And as soon as I say that, I kind of get like, well, Hillary called us deplorables. By the way, that's a misquote. I really encourage anyone that feels that way to go look up actually what she said about the deplorables in full. But the cruelty is the point with ICE. This has been his objective. There is um, a bloodthirst, for lack of a better word, amongst the base where they don't just want to see, and I'm not putting this on anybody here, but there is a portion of the base that doesn't just want to see stronger immigration laws, that doesn't just want to see people deported or stronger policy. There is a portion of the base that wants to see these people hurt. They want to see them suffer. ICE has been recording this stuff and putting it online themselves, even to the point of, like I had mentioned yesterday, the videos of the Darth Vader and the Pokemon targets. There is a cruelty to this. The Stephen Miller aspect of this party has been incredibly cruel. And to that point, I just want to point out that there is a different way to do this. We can enforce our laws, our immigration laws, without this level of rhetoric. And when you look at the numbers, I asked Grok for this, by the way, the first year of Obama, Biden, and Trump's presidencies, Trump 2 here specifically, who had the highest level of deportations? And the answer is Biden, then Obama, and then Trump.
Yeah, but those numbers, Lily, those numbers are all skewed because it's all about stopping them at the border and then sending them back. So those numbers. You can't make that argument. That's a bullshit argument.
No, it isn't a bullshit argument.
It is a bullshit argument.
I will be happy to address that. So there is that issue of the expulsions. And if you don't want to count that, because Grok actually makes a count for that too. If you don't want to count the expulsions done by Title 42 at the border, then just rearrange it. It then becomes Obama #1, Trump #2, and Biden #3. So even under those terms, Obama still deported more people than Trump in his first year of presidency. We didn't have this kind of atmosphere. We didn't have this kind of level of rhetoric. lots of people on the left criticized Obama for his policies, deporter in chief, but we didn't have this kind of shit on the street with ICE and this level of rhetoric. Part of this is due to a xenophobic, very virulent, punishing attitude towards immigrants. And I'm sorry that that's happening. So, anyways, that's what I wanted to say. Feel free to take it apart, Kenny.
Okay.
Professor Kenny.
No, good, all good stuff, Lil. All good stuff. Your point about let's really get to the bottom of it instead of making these judgments on the left or the right is 100%. My point about her being a criminal is if she did what they say she did, she committed a criminal act, and that's what would make her a criminal. But we need more facts. I agree with you there.
Well, I
Frank.
know, but on that issue, hold on though. But
Yep.
on that issue, you have to keep in mind when you call somebody a criminal, there has to be intention to commit a crime. That's kind of it's called mens rea under the law. You can Google it. Ignorance of the law is something different. You can't be ignorant of the law, but even if you are, you still have to have a guilty. In other words, you say, "Well, I didn't know I couldn't." Bob was making this point in the chat, so I'll use it. If you're speeding, you can't say, "Well, I didn't know the speed limit was this much," but you still knew you were speeding, right? Like there has to be an intention of wrongdoing. We don't know what this woman was doing. Like I said, there was these conflicting commands. If you listen to the tape again, one officer seems to be telling her to move, the other person's telling her to get out of the car. So it is possible that she was trying to comply by moving. And we don't, like I said, we don't know. It wasn't a case of her being there all day harassing these things that happened first thing in the morning. And from what I've read, again, I think that a lot of things can change as investigation and more facts come out, is that she had dropped off her children. She was a mother of 3 children, and she had dropped off her child and was somehow ended up there. I don't know under what circumstances. So
no,
anyway.
Let's get to the facts and then we'll find out, right? Let's get Frank in. Frank? You gotta unmute yourself, Frank. There you go.
All right. So let's see. I'm surprised at being called upon. So, all right. So let's see. At the start, the tragedy of this. This is not what I think of tragedy. You can give us a tutorial on what tragedy is supposed to be. I guess the word is morphed, but I think that they're celebrating in the Walt's office, because the focus is completely off the corruption and the scams. And besides that, this incident might be beneficial because it brings up the discussion as to what the appropriate methods and tactics of ICE should be, and that sort of thing. The murder of this person is easily seen from the standpoint of the protesters as the result of ICE operations which they don't want in their state. And it's sort of like a nullification of federal law by state and local authorities and citizens. And we've heard of jury nullification. This is federal law enforcement nullification, kind of an interesting thing. The political rhetoric employed in Minnesota, it was of course designed to obstruct the operations of ICE in order to reduce the ability of ICE to interfere with their what they call their citizenry or their residents, and so this was intentional. Now, so the peaceful protest that Jack Smith refers to regarding Trump, inciting the January 6th rioters to commit this breach of the Capitol, etc., and take tours and sit in the speaker's chair and all that sort of stuff with wearing a horn helmet. This kind of thing is very similar. It seems to me that Jack could get on his high horse and indict Tim Walz and the mayor of wherever this was, Minneapolis or something. So Now, the tactic, okay, on the morning meeting, this fellow explained a tactic used by police officers during traffic stops to block the left headlight by putting your foot on the fender, on the bumper rather, and to minimize the risk to the officer and maximize the risk to the detained or suspect in the car. I don't like that tactic. I think I understand why they do it, but actually, this has nothing to do with this case, by the way, because this officer did not do that. He was just standing in front of the car. But I don't like that tactic and the traffic stop, and I can hardly wait for it to be used on me. I slip and somehow push him a little bit, and suddenly, boom, attempted murder. The domestic terrorism bit is sort of a reading of the domestic terrorism definitions, which means which is I think, but I'm not sure what their analysis is, but it has to do with illegal activity for political purposes or to obstruct the government or something like this. So it falls within the definition, but it certainly doesn't sound good. And I think that that's really tone deaf to say it. But I think we should think about this domestic terrorism definition and refine that a little bit. So, but as far as it being a tragedy, I'm not sure it's a tragedy. And once again, you can give us a tutorial on what tragedy used to mean and what it means today. But I think there might be a beneficial result in that people are going to be a little bit less willing to do this kind of obstruction and violence against ICE officers. 9 ICE officers have been attacked by vehicle or something like that. So this might have some beneficial result. So anyway, so that's like 6 or 7 different things.
Yeah, but Frank, you said murder. Do you look at this as a murder?
Well, they think it's a murder, and it's not totally unreasonable because they think they have the right to nullify the actions of federal law and to obstruct federal law enforcement. And so they think they have that right.
You're talking about the left's position. Okay.
The protesters.
Yeah.
Well, come on, it's half the country. I mean, it's not just the protesters. It's what you're saying. Yeah. So, I think I mean, our education system has failed us for the last 40 years, and so they don't ascribe to this bit of constitution, laws, and everything like that. It's all it's feelings and your own truth, and so unless that whole thing is worked out and reconciled, you're not going to do it. And this whole evil political bit that we're spending so much time dealing with is just, it feeds on this. It's delightful, and there's no tragedy to them, in Minnesota, none at all. They use this as an opportunity. I remember all kinds of terrible things that happened where my friends said, "Well, this is great because now we can." Do gun control or something like this, these mass shootings, they love them. So this is kind of cynical, and it's hateful in my opinion. And if anything qualifies as evil, this might be it. I don't do the good and evil bit, but a lot of you guys do, and so anyway.
Okay.
That's my.
All right. Thank you, Frank. Haley.
So I just wanted to briefly kind of talk about more like the general feeling, kind of take it away from like just because we were talking about ICE in general and Obama and things like that, and I before Lily brought it up, that was kind of going to be my point, is that Obama still to this day is the number one deporter. When it comes to numbers and deportations, he still is the number one, even with all the with what's been happening in the last, since Trump's first administration and this one so far. So I feel like it could either be one or two things. Obama was president, obviously, from 2008 to 16. And it could be that we just didn't, we weren't in the social media craze that we are now, and we aren't seeing the videos and the way that ICE, acted like from '08 to 16. Like it could be that they were the exact same way. And it's just that now people have a cell phone and everybody is, taking it out and filming all these incidents. But it could also be that Obama just did things in a different way in order to achieve the numbers that he did in the deportations. So I feel like because it's been done by a former president already, high numbers in deportations, which I think most of us can agree nobody wants the, you know, illegal criminals, actual, violent criminals in our country. And we can all agree that those are the people that I know that when I didn't vote for Trump, but I know that when Trump won, that was one of the things that, let's say, I was looking forward to seeing happening. That was one of the things that, I totally agreed is violent criminals who murder people like Lake and Riley need to be out of this country. And I don't think anybody on here would argue that. However, I have made it clear very much that I am a very big civil liberties person. And the things that we've been seeing, people have argued with me that we don't know, that it could be that they are, we don't have access to warrants and charges and things like that, which is true. We don't have it on every case. But nobody can argue that seeing some of the videos, let's say from LA a couple months ago, some of the instances where you have, for all intents and purposes, regardless of if it's lawful or not, the optics is you have unmarked cars picking people up off the streets in front of soft targets like schools and workplaces by masked law enforcement officials. And regardless of what Trump is trying to do, if you're for it or against it, and it does not look good for his administration. And it is a problem. And it's something that half the country has issues with and legitimate issues with. When we have cases, I don't know if you guys know the organization FIRE. They work a lot with it's a civil liberties group. I forget what the acronym stands for, but they have cases up the wazoo of deportation cases of people's civil liberties being violated. So these aren't things that Trump is not doing everything right when it comes to ICE, and there are questions that we need to ask and answer. And I'm not talking about the cases like the famous ones like the Maryland man or whatever it is, but there are actual other cases that are being litigated and 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 have been proven that ICE has lied in certain circumstances and things like that. So there has to be a way that we can discuss this and make our country safe, but also not infringe on people's civil liberties. And I think that is a justified argument from people who are not so comfortable with all the ICE operations in the country. So I just wanted to bring that standpoint.
Yeah, I'm looking at numbers. This year, Trump's deported 600,000 people, and Obama's first year as president was 389,000. So we gotta make sure we know what we're talking about, because I know in the first term they're comparing Obama. When you go online, you look at this stuff. They're looking at Obama's presidency, his first term, compared to Trump's first term. I'm talking about this year compared to any other year to
Okay, but
any
you
other president.
can agree with me that it was done in a totally different manner with, okay, not as much numbers, let's say, but high enough numbers to put forth a pathway that it doesn't have to be this way.
Listen, I get, and that's the fair argument that you and Lily are making. Do we need to be, going in the streets? But this is another point I want to bring up. I'm all over this country. Spent the whole summer all over the country. Some of you I visited. I go up and down the East Coast corridor. I live in Brooklyn. I have a place in Jersey. I have a place in Florida. You know how many ICE agents I've run into? Zero. Zero. Okay? So this whole idea that we have this whole problem with ICE it's all bullshit. Okay?
No, but they are targeting predominant immigrant communities. Southern Los Angeles, there's a huge immigrant community. I mean, we can't, of course, I mean, I don't see ICE in my backyard either. I don't see ICE anywhere in New York City, but that's because right now we're playing ball with the Trump administration in New York City. So it's, it's touchy. They do target predominantly immigrant society,
But that's where they are. Why would they not go where the immigrants are? The illegal immigrants are. Where are they
No,
supposed to?
Professor
They're
Kenny's
supposed
just
to go
saying
to
it's not
South
like a,
Dakota where there's not any immigrants and waste resources.
but they're not
Like
going into Texas.
they are going to Texas, except Texas is working with them. Mitch sent something about yesterday. I'll try to pull it up in the log from yesterday. But he sent something about how they're just if someone they run ICE, they run their people in jail through ICE all the time, and they just hand them over to ICE. Like that would solve the problem if you weren't a sanctuary city. I mean, I just think when you say they're going to immigrant communities, well, you said South Los Angeles. I'm not familiar. Aaron would know better than me, but let's use your example. Like if that's where they are, why would they not be there? Like they're supposed to go somewhere where there's no immigrants? I don't know.
I understand your point, but what I'm saying is there was a way that we did this in the past that reached the numbers that people were criticizing Obama for years. Deporter in chief, that's the nickname they had for him. So my point is there is a way where we can do this in the middle, where we get rid of the criminals without having riots in southern Los Angeles. That's what I'm trying to say. Is I just think that been a little bit the administration. I can't deny Lily's point when she says that there is cruelty involved here, and it does seem like that there is an essence of cruelty that didn't exist 8 years ago, 10 years ago, is what I'm trying. Just that's the point I'm trying to make, and the civil liberties argument is a big one for me as well.
Thanks. Let's bring in Yakov. What's up, Jack?
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, it would be great if New York City and other sanctuary cities allowed the ICE people to go into the jails and or deport the illegal straight from jail, so we don't end up the way we ended up yesterday. And it'd also be great if ICE comes to New York City, for crying out loud. I could show them fucking blocks of where people 7 o'clock in the morning and wait for work. But and also I'm old enough to remember Barack Obama like bombing, killing American citizens and using drones to kill people, and no one said anything, and all of a sudden we arrest Maduro and all shit breaks loose. And I'm also old enough to remember Bill Clinton having a ICE agent, I think, going with a gun to a 10-year-old kid and to send him to Cuba. But let's not talk about that. The reason why I really I don't consume regular news anymore, and I just listen to 2A and after shows is because of last night's show, specifically because of Ryan and Lily. They were able to thread the needle of maybe the police or the ICE agents should have acted a different way, but at the same time seeing the point of view of the ICE agent. So like I appreciated their comments last night, and my rule is I fail at it, and I fail it, but I'm trying harder. Is whenever these big events happen, wait 72 hours to a week and let the facts come out. Like we don't know what the hell happened.
Yep.
We're pining on shit that we don't know. Why was the car in the middle of the road? All of that stuff. We'll wait and see. But at the same time, I'm old enough to remember a congresswoman saying, if you see anyone from the Trump administration walking on the street, get into their faces and tell them you're not welcome anywhere. And I'm old enough to remember Trump administration officials being heckled, being harassed during dinner in restaurants and having demonstrations in front of Supreme Court justices' homes. So that's that. And I'm old enough to remember, all these officials. Leland Vitters had a great montage of tons of officials calling ICE the Gestapo and Nazis last night. But I also agree with Lily and with Ryan. Words matter. So when you have a mobs for 2.5 years, going from pro-Palestinian to pro-Hamas to anti-Jewish, Jews to demonstrating in front of a synagogue and physically preventing people from going into a synagogue, and you say, oh, it's because of settlers. Yeah, words matter. So the same time, for the past 2.5 years, when words didn't matter, now words matter. I agree, words matter. Stand up.
Yep.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Very good, Jakob. Yes, Lily and Ryan are very valuable to this community. We wouldn't be the same without them. Raleigh, what's going on?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah. I know you got to talk low. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
hear you.
yeah, so I just wanted to say people keep comparing this to Obama, and I keep saying over and over and over again, Obama did not face the same resistance from local authorities that Trump has faced. You just heard the mayor of Minneapolis say, "Get out of here." He literally went on television and he cursed and said foul language, which Evan Glass had no problem with that, but he literally said that, and he said, "Get out of my town." That never happened under Obama, never. And there's protesters that block roads, block streets, do all these kinds of things. That never happened under Obama. And yeah, of course, there's all kinds of chaos and all kinds of violence that happens when ICE tries to enforce the law and do these things. And, and yeah, it leads to a lot of problems. And that's all I wanted to say.
Right. So your point is the lack of cooperation for Trump
Yeah.
and ICE as opposed to Obama. Yep, we get it. We get it. Let's get Evan in. Can you unmute Ev?
Yeah, it takes me a while. That's a good shot at me, Raleigh. And that's fine. And that's fine. But you didn't ask me what I thought about Walls because I think Walls is a putz. Um, so to take that shot at me, if it makes you feel better, makes you feel taller, have a great day. I'm fine with that. But by the way, my contempt for Walls is probably just as great as your contempt for Walls. Um, that being said, I missed most of what went on because I had to work. So I'm not sure if anyone drew the parallel, and if you did, just cut me off because this is going to be superfluous. The analogy between Ashley Babbitt and this woman. So to me, if you somehow find some level of support for Ashley Babbitt, her actions were much more aggressive than this woman, and I think this is a good shoot. I don't get the entire level of controversy over the shoot itself. I think that's to me it's fairly close to textbook. But when I hear people who are defending um, basically the same side I'm on, which is defending the ICE agent, and yet they are somehow find a reason to defend Ashley Babbitt, I find that just preposterous and contradictory in terms of logic. So that was one point. Yaakov, I couldn't understand. You want ICE agents in New York City. I do too. Um, but behind that premise is, do all your contractors? Do you make sure all of your contractors aren't using illegals? Because if you are, then you might be the first person in all of New York City construction who does that.
Yes. And not only that, I make sure that everybody has workers' comp, disability, liability,
Well, we all do that.
harmless, hold harmless, identification.
And yeah, we all do that.
Social security numbers. And I need to see an ID card.
Well, then guess what? You win the prize because you're the one.
I'm not that big. I'm able to do that, but hell fucking yes. I'm not gonna. I know somebody who lost a building on Broadway because of shenanigans, and I want to go to sleep at night. So,
Well, I think it's great, but I know when I stayed at the Trump Doral in Florida, awful lot of people there working who just didn't seem to necessarily. Now, this is, by the way, this is the Professor Kenny, you would know, this is the weekend of the Miami Miracle. So it's got to be 7 years ago. And I stayed at his place, which, by the way, was fabulous. And there were an awful lot of people there who I'm willing to bet a pretty penny were not legal. So,
Evan, you have to tell me about who Ashley Babbitt is.
That's the girl that was
Ashley
killed
Babbitt's
in
the woman
I
January
who
know
was
who it
shot
is,
in
but I don't
JFK.
know if people on the show knows.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. Enough is enough. And like a long time ago, somebody in my community was arrested for having a meat or like a poultry factory, and he was pardoned by Donald Trump. And I'm not going to go into the whole case, and there's a lot of shit what happened. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of a lot of illegals. I'm not going to say undocumented. A lot of fucking illegals there, and it tore my heart apart. It's disgusting. It was shameful. You have to have a higher standard. Simple as that.
Yeah. Okay, so just I'll finish off with Raleigh. I didn't hear, I focus on Walz because I just think he's a major putz. I didn't hear the mayor of Minneapolis, so I'm not as in tune. Unfortunately, I'm a little too busy with work to, do I think these guys should be dropping F-bombs? Probably not. I don't mind. By the way, the best F-bomb ever dropped, ever, by a politician was by Donald Trump when he's talking to the press about Israel and Iran.
Yeah.
And he's on the press line. He says about Netanyahu and the Iranians, I don't think these guys know what the fuck they're doing, which, by the way, couldn't have been a better usage of the word. And so I have one question, which is, I think it's Wally. Why is it unfair to compare?
Where is Wally? Wally, why is it unfair to compare?
Wally, let me have it. By the way, that's why I love this. Seriously, you know what? You could convince me. Maybe I'm wrong. Come at me. That's all good.
Well, let me start by asking you, why you think that is a good comparison.
Because
you're the one who made the comparison.
Okay, because when this first happened, and I was monitoring the chat yesterday, everyone went in their respective corners, right? Initially.
Sure.
And then there was a little more, nuance to it, right? The people on the Dan O crowd, and for the record, guys, I'm friends with Dan. I know you guys aren't a big fan of him. The Dan O crowd thought it was murder, which is preposterous in my mind. And then the far right crowd, knee jerk was, of course she had it coming to her. And that's an extreme use of the wordage, right? But clearly that the cop was right and she was wrong. And now I'm comparing that to the incident on January 6th, which is this woman is breaking through a window to try and encroach in the Capitol, and there's an armed guard on the other side, and she gets shot. And the people on the far right somehow think that that was just an act of protest and didn't deserve that type of response. And people on the left would say, you kind of got what you deserved. And I am saying, and I don't think it's a horrible analogy, it may not be the world's greatest. And I'm saying that the level of outrage is viewed through your political prism. And I tend to be kind of a centrist, depending upon, you could see, I'm completely in favor of the ICE officer here, as I was in favor of the officer in the Capitol. All right. And let me even make it worse. This way, Raleigh could really shit on me. I think if all the protesters in the Capitol were black, I think there'd be a hell of a lot more shooting going on there.
That's an irrelevant point right now.
I know it is, but I just wanted to tweak Raleigh a little bit so he can go at me. But the bottom line is, so Wally, that's why I drew that analogy, because I think what it does is it highlights that people are looking at this too much through a political prism rather than through just a basic common sense prism. That was it.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Now I see why you're using that as a comparison, because of how people view it through their own political prism. I was looking at strictly from, the shoot itself, and And when I'm trying to think of the Capitol Police officer's name is a lieutenant, I think Bird, I think was his name. He's the one who shot and killed her. And I would ask you, what did she uh, did you perceive her as presenting a lethal threat or a deadly threat to the officer when he shot her? Did he give her any type of warning ahead of time? Did it because he used lethal force? He killed her. And what purpose at that point? Did he have legal cause to take her life at that moment when she didn't pose an imminent threat to him?
When you're in a mob, and I'm not going to give the strict legal definition because I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to pretend to be one, but when you're in a high intensity mob event where the adrenaline is running high, right? Let's acknowledge to that point we're on the same page, right? Maybe mistakes are going to happen, but who's to say that when she breaks through that window, or someone else broke the window and she went through it, that there's not going to be a stream of people behind it? I don't have any, I personally have, and you could say legally I'm wrong, and you might be right. I have no problem at that point with the officers defending, one, the property, and two, their potential personal safety. I think that's part of being in law enforcement, I think, is you may have a higher bar to respond, but you also have a higher right to protect your safety.
Well, I mean, I see what the point you're trying to make, but in that instance, he didn't have a legal right, in my opinion, to take her life at that point. At that point, I mean, why weren't the other officers throughout the Capitol shooting the protesters as they were coming through each window? They were coming through all kinds of windows and broken doors,
Yeah.
and the law enforcement wasn't shooting people like that. And in that instance, there, and like I said, I probably, when that took place, I'll bet you I probably had conversations with at least 20 other fellow law enforcement officers, and every one of them just said, "Man, that just looked like a bad shoot. Like he just didn't have the legal right, based on the totality of the circumstance." So I just think, did was she doing something she shouldn't have been doing? And oh, certainly, was she? And it was going beyond just protesting. It was violent what she was doing. Breaking through the window, trying to climb through. I just think in that moment, that officer did not have the legal right to take her life. There was probably other things that could have been done.
So you may very well be correct, both legally and maybe even morally. I'm a big believer in you are responsible for your personal behavior.
Sure.
And what you do has consequences. Sometimes they're dire, sometimes they're lethal. But frankly, if you control your behavior, more often than not, you're going to be okay. Okay? Don't break into the Capitol, expect no response. Don't drive into an ICE officer. Your right to protest stops where the perimeter of an ongoing law enforcement procedure is happening. Okay? That's where it's like the old line, your right to smoke stops where my nose begins. You don't have unfed. Your right to protest is very valuable. That's why this country exists. But the limitations on there are important before consequences come in. And we talked about yesterday how critical personal responsibility is. And that's where I think most of us actually are in agreement. What the consequences to that are is where we may disagree. And an officer of the law, it's just not a great job, right? And most of them never pull a gun in their lives, right? 90 something percent of them never pull a gun in their lives. But when there is things like these types of situations, which are horrific and unfortunate, I tend to have just a little more understanding of how police officers respond, um, because it's not so easy. You can have all the and obviously, listen, you're law enforcement, I'm not, right? But um, these things are just not that easy and not that simple, and people just have to be responsible and understand. Hey, listen, if I'm going to protest and I'm going to tweak this guy, right? Remember the visuals, the BLM movement, where the protesters are going nose to nose with the officers, or nose to shield with the officers, or mask to shield with the officers, depending upon where they are. And the officers are sitting there and they're restrained, and you're calling them all kinds of names. It takes an awful lot. And at some point in time, I just feel that we have to be a little understanding towards law enforcement about the pressures they're under in these situations, notwithstanding the training that they get. Because this could be happening more if there wasn't for the training that they've gotten.
Sure, and I agree. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I appreciate you explaining your perspective on why you were comparing it. Now, in regards to the Ashley Babbitt shooting, the lieutenant that was in there, I suspect that he didn't have a lot of actual hands-on law enforcement experience and training. He was a lieutenant. He worked in the Capitol. Probably didn't have to deal with incidents like that. And on one hand, I did sympathize with the plight he was up against at the time with all that was going on. The lady coming through the window. I think a street officer who'd had more experience dealing with that, probably my estimation would never have pulled the trigger on Ashley Babbitt. So you kind of have to put it in context of who was the one behind the gun there.
So who has, and I promise Jimmy, I'm done after this. I'm sorry. Who, in that particular scenario, who's got the greater personal responsibility? Who's more of the victim?
Between who?
Between Ashley Babbitt and the officer. I may be wrong. I'm serious. I know I might be wrong. But who do you think is more responsible? To me, she doesn't break through a window. She's alive right now. It's not like
yeah, but it
didn't know
wasn't like
breaking
she
through the
just
window.
broke through a window. It was a whole mob breaking through the window.
And
This
guess
guy
what?
didn't. This guy shot into the crowd in at that window. Okay.
But Jimmy, wasn't her.
I don't want to listen. I don't want to
Okay.
rehash
Sure.
Ashley Babbitt. We can save that for
Sure.
another debate. Okay, because
Thank
we're
you.
getting off the deep end here. But we could go back to
No,
that.
it's not that.
I
I'm
want
done.
to bring Kelly in, and then
Thank you, Evan.
we're gonna finish up with Aaron.
I was just gonna note. Did anyone see the announcement last night that we've withdrawn from 66 international
Yes.
organizations?
It's in all the papers too. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's deal with that either tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron, finish it off.
Well, first thing is the number one mission of the Capitol Police is to protect members of Congress. That's their principal, meaning like that's their principal executive security function. I think it was pretty clear that human beings who don't have authorization to be in the Capitol are not allowed to be in the Capitol. And large-scale populations of people, i.e. mass protests, regardless of politics, do not have the right legally to assault the Capitol. I actually believe, the Capitol Police underperformed in their shooting.
Right, they were dereliction of duty.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm serious. So there should have been a couple hundred protesters shot, and basically everyone inside that building who was not law enforcement should have been shot. Like, period. And I'd have no problem with that. And because at the end of the day, their intent was pretty clear, which was to number one, violate the premises, cause destruction, use implements that they had to cause that destruction. They assaulted officers. They used fire extinguishers in those assaults, and they were going on a continuous rampage, which of course was going to inevitably lead to Congress themselves. And so are we saying that we either confront them at that front door, or do we wait until they get to the actual doors of Congress, or do we wait until they get to their chairs or to the gavel? Like, at what point can you use force? My view is as soon as a mass, and by the way, we could run this back as a simulation. If 500 people right now just grabbed a bunch of stuff from Home Depot, and ran off of trucks, just a thunder run assault into the congressional doors, and just try to charge their way in, how many of them get shot right now? More than one, right? My guess is probably 10, 20, 30. And that's all because of coordination gaps. Let's run that scenario over and over again. Eventually you get to 50 to 100 pretty quickly. Because what do you see? You see a threat to your principal responsibility, which your number one responsibility and Capitol Police is the protection of the members of Congress. That's number one. Like, people don't basically understand the Capitol Police is basically a combination of a localized police force around what's defined as Capitol property, as its jurisdiction, and a kind of a half-ass Secret Service. Basically, not really a Secret Service, but not one. Very much like in law enforcement, you have VIP, services that are done in law enforcement. A good friend of mine that I grew up with, LAPD, that's one of the roles he has in LAPD Metro. And big enough police departments, they create basically a Metro division or something like that, where those officers get more training. And when there's an event, political leaders come, or some big type of social or large scale kind of high risk event, those officers act as sort of like your own local Capitol Police, because they have the most training, and they're there to interact with the principal's security, if the principal has security.
Right. Listen, let's not go down here, Aaron. Okay. Let's.
Well, no, it's important to go down here because
it's important,
there's a
but not now. Go
hypocrisy.
into this Minnesota shooting.
No, because it's all hypocrisy at the end of the day.
Of course
right?
it is. Of course
okay,
it
but
is.
no one's saying that. No one wants to just say those words. People are being dishonest structurally. Look, at the end of the day, the reason the Trump administration does not want to do what I would call Obama with teeth, and what Obama with teeth would be you do all the stuff Obama did, and you would then target the businesses, as David Marsh said and others said earlier, with rapidly escalating fines from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of dollars a day, and criminal prosecution. But the Trump administration does not want to arrest tens or hundreds of thousands of business owners, and hundreds of thousands to millions of suburban and urban upper middle class and upper class people. That's the hypocrisy. Like, that's the bottom line hypocrisy, and no one wants to talk about that. So we're playing this theatrical game, which is running around and getting at most an extra 1,000 people a day. And it's a question of how much is the juice worth the squeeze. By the way, 3 more years of this action and another 5 or 10 of these incidents, ICE won't be ICE anymore. I mean, that agency is going to lose all of its ability to have a brand in the United States of America. It's going to have to be completely reorganized, very similar to the formation of the FBI.
Thanks, James Reagan. Thanks. Just wanted to say thanks to him.
But because basically the prior national law enforcement, which was the version of the IRS and the Treasury Department, lost all of its credibility in the 1920s into the 30s. This is exactly the same thing. So, you do 3 more years of this, you won't have ICE and border enforcement structure this way anymore. So you're burning another institution to the ground, which obviously the administration's fine with, because that's how they roll. But the bottom line is, this institution won't exist if this is the model that they operate in. And in the end, gaining what? What are you actually gaining? Right now, it's pretty clear that if you were fining businesses dramatically and arresting business people dramatically, you would have a self-deportation that's probably 3 million a year. But you don't want that. Like, you want the theatrics. See, this is the dishonesty and the hypocrisy. It's just admit that. That's okay. That's your politics right now. Just like hard left-wing politics wants permanent protest. Like, I mean, it's because at the end of the day, you want revenge. Like, people who want this want revenge. They basically are saying, these people are bad, right? And when we say these people, immigrants, right? Like, let's be real here. So this is the hypocrisy that we're in right now. And I'm just calling bullshit on this, right? Because at the end of the day, if your goal is having 10 million less people who are not legally documented in the United States, the easiest way to get them out is you eliminate the ability to go to school here, and you eliminate their ability to work here. And they will self-deport, because basically, which proves the point, they want to come here to go to school and work. Well, guess who doesn't want to go to school and do these jobs? A lot of Americans who don't want to do the jobs these people do or go to school the way these people go to school. That's just the bottom line. So that's fine. If you want that trade, fine, you get that trade, but just be honest about it. Like, you could do that by just having traditional IRS like enforcement actions. You don't need literally kinetic teams running around the country trying to bag maybe 600 people a day to 1,000 a day, which, by the way, that's just going to get harder and harder as time goes on, right? And you're going to have more kinetic teams in ICE, which isn't its primary mission anyways. Its primary mission is border enforcement at the border and within 100 miles. So that means you're training a whole bunch of people. This is how we broke the Army and the Marine Corps in Iraq, right? We gave them all these other missions that were not the core missions of large-scale peer fighting. And we did that for 15, 20 years. So if you take ICE and you do this for 5 years, right, you won't have ICE and border enforcement as a structure. You'll basically have a bunch of half-ass FBI warrant teams running around. That's what you'll have, and U.S. Marshal teams running around. I mean, that's it. And then when that funding dries up because we go to another enforcement action, all those guys, mostly guys, are going to be out there looking for suburban law enforcement jobs. Like, that's how this thing's going to go down, right? And so at the end of the day, this is the hypocrisy. If your goal is 10 million more people or less people here in the United States that are illegal or undocumented, then you shut off schools and you shut off their ability to work. And you do that by fining and arresting people who hire them, whether in residential homes, which means your family members, or anyone using someone cutting lawns, or anyone cleaning anything out there. Because regular Americans, no one wants to clean up operating rooms on the third shift in a hospital on a Friday night. That's why this stuff's contracted, subcontracted, and subcontracted. By the way, police stations, same shit, right? Like, it's going on everywhere, right? Like, let's stop playing this game, right? Start arresting people who hire people who are undocumented and illegal for anything. Start fining them, start getting them fired, start taking their businesses away, impound their cars, right? Like, brutality towards the person who is employing them. And I guarantee you will collapse all of this. But Trump won't do that. He won't do that, just like he won't take on Putin for exactly the same reason, because he knows he'll get punked. And that's the bottom line. And that's the hypocrisy here. And at a certain point, the fact that people are unwilling to see this, call it out, or just be honest about it, just speaks to the contribution in that hypocrisy. I mean, that's just what it is. So every day you're driving down the street and you see people doing lawn work, you see people cleaning at 2 a.m, you see people doing all these jobs, food processing, everything that sucks in this country. That without doing that means we suck 30% more, because that's who does this work, right? You need to, if you want to get them out, well, all those people, they're not showing up for free labor and just randomly going to a shift at a pig processing plant, right? Like, people don't do that. They get hired. They get hired by contractors, subcontractors, subcontractors. And those people are picking people up at 3 a.m. in vans, driving them 2 hours. Everyone knows this. Local law enforcement knows this. State law enforcement knows this. Federal, everyone knows this. You're all complicit. Stop lying to yourself. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And so we could play this theater game, which is what we are doing. And by the way, why are we doing this? Because the immigrants or the Mexicans, they're rapists, they're all this shit. It's 10 years of this rhetoric. Well, this is what you get now. So now we're going to test this out, because now we're going to get white suburban women shot. All right, let's see what the white suburban women vote do when they start getting clipped, right? Because that's the test case now. Do you start losing their vote or not? My guess is you ain't picking up more white women suburban voters in the last year going into the midterms, right? I mean, go look at all the YouGov polling. What do you see in swing? You're seeing women swing, you're seeing Hispanics swing. It's not a shock, right? And that's why Trump's out there saying, I'm going to get impeached, right? You got to come out and vote. Why is he saying that? Because they know their internal poll numbers are collapsing amongst Hispanics and suburban white women who are the swing voters in America. You might not like it, but that's just the facts. Unless you want to arrest them, deport them, right? You're not going to be able to change that, which means you're going to get clocked in elections because people don't want to see this shit for 4 years. They just don't. Like, if you think this is politically sustainable and you're going to win elections this way, you're not. You're appealing to the base you already won with. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You're not going to get that base plus vote anymore. That plus vote is moving from you. And instead, you're like doubling down on it. So I'm like, double down on it. Go get some more white suburban women killed. That'll be fun. You will lose more elections.
Well, if there's an epidemic of killing white suburban women, I'm sure that'll
look,
definitely
and you want my answer
chances.
on this shoot here, and this is where it gets ugly, is that it's likely a conflict of communication. So and remember, for the most part, federal law enforcement are not. I mean, look, the number one thing all police in America are basically trained in is how to stop a car and how to go into someone's house. And I mean, that is like the two massive encounters that they have. And so you could take a police officer in Ventura, California, dump them into Long Island and say, stop a car. And outside of some local weird, regulations around, driving and turn handles, they would be able to do that stop, without any support or be able to go into a home. And they do that hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times. Federal law enforcement doesn't do traffic stops on a normalized basis. And when they do stop vehicles, they do a box typically because they're doing a high impact arrest. So it's very different. So what my guess is that happened is that the woman was, however she got here, like we have to unravel that, but however she got here, she got there. And then 2-3 officers came around the vehicle. Number one to walk around the vehicle because you want to see all occupants, which he did. And that's what put him in the front of the vehicle. And he got on the driver's side because obviously that's the threat risk. So he positioned himself not in front of the vehicle. You position yourself to the side so you have a good angle shot and you can move around and continue your shooting as the vehicle goes around you, right? Like that's trained. Anyone that deals with any kind of vehicle in a military or a police environment. Now, the other officers, they were giving her different instructions. One said, get the F out of the car. Now, what really probably should have happened is one officer should just went in and grabbed the keys and turned it off the ignition. If you think you have that risk, that's what you're going to do. And the other officer's putting a weapon on her, making it very clear, don't press gas, right? I mean, that's that. If you want to stop the vehicle, that's what you're going to do. Or another one breaks the window on the other side, right? Like, so if your goal is that, then that's what you do. But they don't train like that because that's not how they do their stops because they're not doing traffic enforcement, right? So odds are it was a shit show in communication. I'm sure when all the body cams come out, we'll see it was a mess that way, period. Now, here's the issue. If there was 4 kids in the car, does he still shoot? That's the open question I have. Yes, no, maybe. Do you still shoot? There's 2 kids in the car.
Depends on how many bullets he has in the gun.
No, it doesn't. That has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. So my question is, no, but I mean, that's the question because now you're putting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if there's children in the car, they don't shoot.
Okay, so that means you're calculating that threat risk at that point, which means you should be on the comms, which we're not seeing them on the comm. So this is, I think, the sad truth of this. The roads were icy. It's in the morning time. They weren't salted, black ice. It was a train wreck to begin with. They had vehicles off the side. They lost traction. This vehicle either tried to box them or lost traction or lost traction trying to box them, whatever. They perceived that as a threat, at a minimum, as a barrier threat is probably what they perceived. right? They didn't perceive that she had an M4 and was going to rise on them, because if they did, then they would have opened up right as they got
Well,
out
let
of the
me ask you
vehicle.
this simple question.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm very skeptical about videos, but it looked like she was accelerating to leave,
Well, yeah,
right?
because it was one officer said, you need to go.
One officer said like you do with a horse, giddy up and hit him in the ass and let them run fast.
No,
Is
no,
that
no,
what?
no. Jimmy, don't play that game. I mean,
No, I'm
look, at the end of the
serious.
day,
She accelerated.
the
She
one officer
sped
said,
out
"Get
of
the
there.
F out of the
The guy
vehicle."
pulled on the door and she sped out. Okay?
No,
I'm not, listen,
there's
I'm not
multiple
trying, I'm just
officers.
saying. This
No,
is
I'm just saying, come on, dude. You're cherry picking the
no, no,
information.
no. I'm not cherry
Yeah,
picking.
you are.
No, I'm not. You're cherry picking.
No, I'm not. I'm
Yes, you are.
saying there
I'm
was
asking you a simple
conflicting
question. Did
information.
she speed out of there?
She left out of there.
Did
It's
she
icy
speed
roads.
out of there? You
It's
don't think that was
icy
an
roads.
acceleration?
It's icy roads. That's not real. You saw law enforcement officers and people slipping and falling on their ass. It was icy roads.
Did she
Tires are going to
speed
spin.
out of there, or did she just drive nicely out of there?
There's no driving nicely
Exactly.
on black ice.
Okay.
On black ice.
Okay. I see what
No,
you're
there
saying.
isn't.
I understand the point you're trying to make.
And so my point is that was typically when you get something like this, it's a failure across the board.
100%.
Exactly. But by the way, do you think this supports them 3 more years of doing this and 5 or 10 more of these incidents?
Well, like I said, you do that all the time. Well, when there's 7 more of these incidents, okay.
Why am I
7
doing
more.
that? Because
We've had
I think
one.
it helps.
You had one. You've had one.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So
7
you think
more.
in 3
Then
more
we'll worry
years of
about
this,
it.
you're only going to have this one? Is that what you think? What's your over/under on that? I'll bet the Steelers have a better chance of beating the Texans this weekend.
My over/under is under 7.
Then there's not going to be more of these incidents.
7.
Huh?
My over/under is under 7. My over/under is under 4.
Okay. So you think less than 4 more of these incidents?
Yes.
Okay. So you think the next 3 years of this kind of enforcement action at this scale, this temperature, 3 more incidents I'll give you. So 1 a year. And that's going to be supportive of long-term BCP and ICE, because ICE is under BCP, So, I mean, like, you think that makes sense?
Yeah.
I mean, Customs and Border Protection, CPB. So you think that makes sense? Like, this is how you'd want to run an agency that's going to be in business a long time. Like, you think this is going to be good for getting continuous funding, regardless of the politics? Or do you think it's going to drive a complete a reformation of see, I look at this institutionally. You can't do crazy shit long term and keep your institutions intact. People lose support. Even losing support is unfair, whatever that means, people just give up on it. They just say, like right now, Capitol Police does not have a lot of support, period. It just doesn't. Why? Because of Jan 6. Right or wrong, it's just facts.
Yep.
And that's one incident. It's big, but it's one incident. Before that, you ask people Capitol Police, 96% of people wouldn't even know what the hell that means. Yeah. Right? Now, 70% of people have an answer. And that answer ain't, oh, Capitol Police is amazing. Let's fund them more. I want to see commercials of them. I like to see them at football games holding flags. Yeah. Nobody says that.
Right.
I'm going to let
Evan make a comment, and then we're going to get out of here.
No, hold on. One last point. You think in 5 years, people are going to want to see ICE and Customs border agents holding flags at football games? Yes or no? Because that's the test case for me.
Yeah, but Aaron, you do everything at scale. So at this scale,
because we're 340 million people.
Hang on, Sparky. Hang on. You're telling me that if there's one incident a year, that's going to undermine the whole. The New York City Police Department has how many incidents a year? All of these law enforcement agencies have multiple incidences a year. If you're telling me, and I know I'm being a little specific here, if you're telling me there's one incident a year,
like this,
Alan, just let me finish and then you can go. But one incident a year from all of ICE's activities, and you think that's going to undermine not legitimacy, but their mandate, I think that's
You
preposterous.
kill 4 suburban white women, moms, over the next 4 years. Hell
Yeah.
yeah. A white suburban woman in America is the most powerful human being we've ever created in our species history.
Did you
Right?
not?
Period.
Do you not?
Right?
Do you
They have
not
more
allow for the?
power, more dominance, they're more swing in everything they do. They have more spending power, everything. You live in a fantasy if you think you can smoke 4 suburban white
Do
women
you not
in four
allow for the
years.
possibility that perhaps they look at this and say, you know what? Maybe we're going to protest, but we're not going to do our Christmas addicts protest. We're going to stand a little farther back, and we're not going to get in the line of fire, or we're not going to
Oh,
try and we're not going to try and put ourselves in
because
such a
that's how
precarious
Karen
position.
rolls. Karen rolls by taking steps backwards. Karen jumps into the gunfight, baby. Like
And,
that's the
oh, and
point.
and by the way, I agree with like 98% of what you said. I thought it was fabulous. I really do. But the last thing you said is just over the top.
It's
Don't tell,
not.
there are people at some point in time, you say, I can protest in a way. And by the way, if you do what you just said, then yeah, guess what? There's consequences and you may get shot. So
Yeah.
these four
this
these
is
four
And
it.
white
now
housewives that
now
you're
you
talking
got
about,
martyred Karens,
The
and you
X
think that
factor.
is politically
The X factor
effective?
is that this happened in Minnesota. That's the X factor. Okay, and the
also a
fact that
mile
it's a
from George
white
Floyd.
woman may helps the
Wearing
situation
her off
go away.
gloomy scarf, which 40 million white women can
Nobody
attest
cares
to.
about Minnesota. That's the problem.
See, you're living in this fantasy, thinking you could control this narrative.
I'm
You
not
can't
controlling
control.
anything. I'm just telling you. Let's see where we are next Thursday, a week from now, if this is even talked about. Let's see where
Well,
we're at.
that's definitely true. But Aaron, I think the better argument, by the way, seriously, I think the better argument is what happens after the midterms. I think that's the next, assuming there's no more
Because
shootings
by the way,
between now
you
and then.
you think Democrats are going to run less women in 28 or 26, I should say, in the midterms, or more women? I mean, it's like you guys don't get that Trump and at least his core people around him, they understand the tenuousness of their politics right now. He wouldn't come out the other day and just straight up say they're going to impeach me. I'm toast. You got to come out and vote. If 10 million of you don't come out, I'm cooked. Like, you don't just randomly say that. What, 24 hours after the most successful Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, and a CIA ground branch mission in history is run? Like, you don't think that the perilousness of their politics in the midterms, that they're not hyper aware of this, but they can't help themselves.
Yeah, and you think if
They're
this
like
happened, you
alcoholics. They
think if
just
this
got to keep
happened in
drinking.
Tempe, Arizona, it would be as blown up as it is now?
Yeah. Look, there is not a place that is not upper middle class or moving upper middle class that is not loaded with millions of white suburban women. And they vote anyways, and they're voting in larger percentages in off year elections. So what's going on in our politics right now, Hispanics to a lesser degree, but white women in the suburbs are becoming the new super voter, and they're starting to vote. They're the closest proximity to old age voters now. That
Right,
means
and I thought those women were the ones that were going to put Kamala over the top. What happened
well,
there?
yeah, and he lost about 4 million of them. But guess what? He hasn't kept those 4 million in the last year, because if he did, do you think he'd be saying they're going to impeach me? Like, if he's gaining these voters, you ain't saying they're going to impeach me. You think you're getting to get your ass smoked in this next election. That's why in January you're already screaming that, hey, we got 10 months to save this thing. Right? I mean, come on, you can't have both sides of this. Logic is logic. I know people want to cancel logic in schools now because it's woke or whatever, but like, you can't actually, like, cancel logic. Right? Because it's tied to math, which is tied to physics,
But
which is
logic,
tied to space.
Aaron,
Right?
logic in this particular case, to be fair,
Yeah.
logic also includes geographical impact. It's a mile from George Floyd, at least someone said that, so that may or
Yeah.
may not be true. So it's a mile from George Floyd, and it's in the state that has more eyes on it than any other state in the union right now. Because of nothing having to, well, I guess you could say the Somali thing has something to do with ICE, but it was the perfect confluence to create the shitstorm.
Yeah.
Right?
And by the way, do these enforcement actions have to roll this way? Or right, as my buddy he's almost 30 years LAPD says, and he's a black Republican, LAPD SWAT Metro guy. It's about as hardcore, hard pipe hitting motherfucker as you get. 35 years in the Army Reserves. I mean, he's real. Is that he says, look, you want to bag soft people? It's simple. Go to a job, they got to come out to their car. You got 2-3 people undercover. You know their schedule. You know the day in the life. You sit there in the car, and as you know, 5-10 minutes before, you go mulling, and that's it. They come out. You say, sir, you have your piece of paper. Right as you start talking to them, 2 others are locking them up. Boom, walking them over. He's nodding his head like, yep, you got me, and away you go. And you can bag all day long like this. This is like going to Dunkin' Donuts. So the problem with that is you aren't getting the theatrics. You're not getting the thunder runs of gun trucks rolling down the street, which looks theatrical. So that's what he wants. And you guys have to admit that.
I can tell you, Aaron, in Tallahassee, that's what they did. They went to the job sites of the construction sites and rounded up 100 people, and the news was reporting that here in Tallahassee. And some people on two-way were talking about it, but they didn't go in like guns a-blazing. It was they waited for the construction site and they went there and got everyone as they were walking off the job site.
So then why do we need thunder runs?
Because
I mean, you could say they're doing the thunder runs in blue states for optics, and I'll concede that point.
Bingo. At least an honest, non-hypocritical person when it comes to this. Yes, optics. That's exactly right.
But Aaron,
but optics are also part of trying to control the narrative as well.
Control the narrative.
You got to
for
look
what?
at
Is
it
your
like
goal
that.
getting
If we're
rid of
looking
10
at it
million people?
logically,
What? Is your goal getting rid of 10 million people?
Don't come here illegally.
Whoever said, Aaron, if you don't think that has some impact, it is part of the reason that the immigration movement, the immigrants numbers have reduced. And who has ever said that part of this is not performative? You want to argue that it's pathetic?
No. Which one, brother? You want 10 million less people or performance art? You pick.
No. You're bifurcating politics versus reality.
Because they're facts.
No.
It's institutional scale.
Again, I'm not disputing what you said. I'm saying both they're parallel tracks. Both things are happening at the same time.
No, they're not. You want to get 6 million people. If someone's like the aliens come down, no pun intended, from space and say, Aaron, get rid of 10 million people in a year or everyone's dead everywhere who aren't legal in the United States. Oh, that's really simple. I announce a galactic IRS Treasury enforcement action across the country, every single business. We are going to enema everybody, every dollar spent, phone call made. We're going to fucking federalize everyone and break everyone. And basically, you will see streams of people. You will have Americans give shit to illegal immigrants. So when they go home, they have stuff because there's going to be so many people leaving. And within we're going to actually have a problem at our border because so many people will be streaming out. We won't even be able to staff it because you'll have hundreds of thousands of people every single week trying to get through. There'll be backlogs for miles.
Well, that's the first time I've heard enemy used as a verb. But
but that's the bottom line. But you all don't really want that. So this is where it's all I'm calling bullshit.
No. Aaron, you know who doesn't want that? You know who doesn't want that? Trump's friends and donors who hire lots of illegals.
That's right.
So I'm trying to be objective about it. But
that means you're hypocrites. You're hypocrites. The hypocrisy has no bounds. Doc Holliday, baby. Good line there for Bob and for the Baron and Jimmy.
There are, but you cannot, from a practical matter, you cannot sit there and think that the administration that is trying to promote this behavior is not going to act in a performative way under certain circumstances. That's just not reality.
Okay, but then you want to play this consequentialism that says, oh well, everyone else who's against it are baddies. It's like, well, you're playing this game that's all performative to begin with. Look, at the end of the day, if I'm seeing fat ass locked up white businessmen who've been running these shell scams, pumping in hundreds and thousands of illegals into 15 different subcontracting businesses, getting locked up, crying, red faced, getting ready to go, meet some friends in the federal penitentiary system. Well, then, like away we go. And then we can get some addresses to send a bunch of condoms and lube to, right? And it's like, let's rip. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to get real here. That's how you get real, right?
Right,
but
well,
no one wants to get real. Like you just want to play these games. Like that's what it boils down to. You want to play these games. That's all it is.
In fairness to Frank, Lily, and Ryan, I'm not. I don't want to go on. I got your point. Most of it, I happen to agree with fully. What I don't agree is when you take the politics, the political behavior out of the equation, because I just don't think it's. I don't think that's realistic. So I'm gonna stop now. And
yep, that's fair. I think we'll disagree on that.
But I think you did seriously. I think you did a fantastic job. Seriously.
We're all gonna stop now. Hold on one second. Yeah, Christy Nome. Yeah. De La Reyes. Yeah. Aaron,
knock yourself out, brother.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Yeah. Gnome should have a different job.
All right. So listen, good discussion today.
Hold on. Lily and Frank haven't gone yet.
No. I'm done.
Okay.
Done.
Well, let Alan let them do it. Come on. That's fair.
We're done.
Come on.
We are done. Plus, we got to save something for Alan's show tonight. Alan had a lot of people on last night for this. We can continue it tonight, and then pick up from tomorrow. Because, like I said, by next week we won't be talking about this.
I really want to talk about Iran, and I also want to talk about the new nutritional guidelines because I'm a big fan of both. So
he said
but
as he ate his In-N-Out burger.
No. But we'll probably end up talking more about this tonight. But if anyone wants to jump on, just I put the link a couple times. I'll put it one last time and join.
Yep, good discussions, folks. Good discussions. Yeah. All right, we'll talk to everybody tonight or tomorrow. Have a good day.
Sorry about Lily and Ryan and Frank.